though, is we're looking at transnational repression. We know how complicated that can be. We also have a situation where, from what I can hear from what your statement was, Minister, academic guidelines, sorry, guidelines don't really help. Like, that's not going to solve any of these problems. It's like asking nicely, which I'm not sure is the response we should have here. You talk about the foreign agent registry, and that it's on the table and you're thinking about it. Well, it does feel like we have had impacted communities tell us that this is a big problem for a very long time, and we are now at a situation where you're considering guidelines, you're thinking about a registry, you're hoping we might be able to move with impacted communities. Does it not seem to you that much of this work should have already been done?
I think it's more precise to say that we actually do have concrete guidelines in place when it comes to protecting our academic institutions.
What if they don't follow those guidelines?
Well, there are working groups to ensure that there's accountability and rigor when it comes to the application of those guidelines, Ms. Mcpherson, and I assure you that the government works very closely with academic institutions to make sure that the application of those guidelines is consistent and coherent, so that we are not in any way allowing for a backdoor into our institutions to allow for foreign interference. Now, how do we do that? We use tools, and those tools, as I said in my introductory remarks, probe into who the research partners are, what is the subject matter of research, and the guidelines are actually quite precise in identifying sensitive areas so that there is a strict standard and screening prior to there being that partnership finalized. So those guidelines are in place, they're objective, they're normed, and they do protect us.
If there are funding agreements with the federal government, if the research grants, if those guidelines aren't followed, is that funding being withheld?
Look, I would share any concern about any research partnership that did not apply the guidelines, which is why we have to be vigilant about it, which is why
concern's different, though, than whether or not that funding would be withdrawn.
If the guidelines were not met, it's certainly my expectation that the funding and the research partnership would not be finalized. That's the whole point of having the guidelines. Now, where that doesn't happen, I think there would need to be a review of the partnership, and both me and my colleagues, the ministers of health, as well as at ISED, are always looking at whether or not there's a way in which we can enhance the application of the guidelines. But I would, just to put a finer point on it, clarify, Ms. Mcpherson, that these guidelines are not abstract. They are not theoretical. They are in place and they are being applied.
I just have one last quick question for you before my time runs out. When you found out, or when you heard the news about these police stations happening in Toronto and Vancouver, did you have conversations with Minister Joly or anyone at Global Affairs Canada?
A brief answer, please, Mr. Minister.
The short answer is yes. I'm in touch with my colleagues all of the time with regards to threats to foreign interference, including on this subject matter.
Thank you.